We've reached the appointed hour to start the meeting. Actually, we're a little bit late. We were waiting on some folks coming in, but we're going to go ahead and start at this point in time. What we have today, I'll call the meeting of the Appropriations Subcommittee for Public Safety to order. Our item of business today is the report of the 2007 mid-year budget. I'm going to go through that. I've gone over the changes with most of the members of the committee. I believe all of the members of the committee, but I will spread those changes on the public record and do my best to articulate those for everyone in the audience. At the end of the time, if committee members have any questions, I'll try to answer those as well. Before I do this, and I'm sure you will always miss someone, but I wanted a special thanks to Charlie Walker, Martha Wigton, and John Brown, the director and deputy director and assistant director of the House Budget Office, for their assistance in doing this. Not all of our budget analysts were able to be here with us. There's multiple meetings, but Michael Parkerson to the far right down here has been a great help. Holly LaBerge to Michael's left. Eiley Glover and Scott Blunt have also worked with us in putting those together out of the House Budget Office. I really appreciate them. I appreciate all of our members sitting through the earlier presentations and to the departments that have met with us during the meetings and have answered questions of the analysts as they came up. I do appreciate this. This is a process where we're trying to move forward on the 07 budget. There's some changes to the governor's recommendations. I'll try to move through those and articulate the changes so that everyone can follow and the reasoning for doing so. Are there questions before I start with the process? Did you have a question for later? I just see your. No, oh, you just hit the button by accident. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure. At this time, then I'll move along and try to go forward with this. And what I would like to say, as we present this, there's going to be some changes. There's going to be some money that was recommended by the governor for expenditure that my recommendation to the committee will be to be removed. Some of that we think programs are worthy and should be done, and they'll be denoted with a yes in the budget. And we have, in our discussions with the analysts, we think there's money within the department to complete those. I'm sure, as everyone knows that has been involved in the process, that further conversations will go as this budget moves forward through to the House floor, onto the Senate, and for conference committee. But we think we have determined an adequate amount of funding in each area. So with that, let me move forward. If the committee would follow along, your budget document is noted in red and green for the reductions in the ads. First, draw your attention to page 4 of 25, Court of Appeals, line 5.1.1. Recommendation is going to be, and I'm not going to read the numbers, you see them in the columns, but the reduction, basically the change is to go from a 4% pay raise to the normal 3% that the state had done for the rest of the employees. That's on 5.1.1. On 5.1.6, we are not recommending that change at this time. That's a policy decision. Those funding for those positions were eliminated in a full year's fiscal budget in 05. We think that is a decision that we will have during the full budget process if and when those positions should be funded. Moving on to page 5 of 25, the Judicial Council on several places, 6.2.1, 6.3.1. We're recommending that the 4% pay raise be reduced to 3. On 6.4.2 and .3 and .4, these are expenses for Westlaw, for the magistrates' probates and the guardianship video that, given the timing of this budget late in the session this year, I'd see its earliest signing would probably be around Memorial Day, and we don't think that those expenses could be encumbered and incurred in FY07. We think all of those things will probably go forward and be looked upon favorably for 08. So those recommendation is to zero out those items. in 6.4.5 and .6 and .7. We are funding those items, but at a reduced amount. Moving on to page 7 of 25. Yes, sir.
And at 6.5, the District Qualifications Commission, we're raising that by, what is that, 6,000 or 358 on the last 6.5.1. Governor's recommendation was 63.58. We're at 55.35.
Yeah, basically, yes. That's the pay raise from yes, sir. Pay raise, yes, sir. That's the reduction in the 4% to 3% on the pay raise. Moving on to page 7 of 25, in 7.1.1, that reflects a change for the pay raise from 4 to 3. And okay, that's the only change on that page. The other change reflect totals. That's the complete changes. That completes the changes on juvenile courts. Prosecuting Attorneys Council, we reflect the same pay raise at 3% on line 8.1.1. This is important to note, and I'm sure this is an item that will be worked through as we go forward to the House floor and perhaps even in conference. But we do want to realize on 8.1.5 the funds for the additional district attorneys for the Cobb and Dublin circuits. We say yes to that. The amount is $151,130 in the governor's budget. We have not recommended funding in this budget, again, because of the timing of those bills' passage and the timing of this budget. We may find, in talking with the Chairman Harbin, that we may need to put a smaller amount than a normal 6-month amount into there for them to do a startup for those 2 positions. And in fact, there may be more than 2 that are statutorily enabled during this session. So it's real clear. Our recommendation is to fund those positions should they pass, and we have reasons to believe that they are needed and will pass. But we did not see the reasoning for the complete funding of the 2 6-month offices, as the budget will probably pass around in April, signed into law in sometime around Memorial Day, and we just don't see the judges being filled up before the next year. So we will continue to have discussions with that group if they need some startup money to make sure that we don't gate the process at all. So that's 8.1.5. But it's important that we do realize the need for those judges, and we'll look to work with the House as the statute comes forward. I believe there may actually be additional judges that we need to look to fund in 2008, if everybody understands that. We move on into the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, 8.2.1. We have the same recommendation from the 4 to 3% pay raise. We have funds on 8.2.4. The requested number has been reduced by half to 711. Still, there's concern about restoring money that was cut from one reason or other in a previous year at mid-year, but out of an abundance of caution, we have left a portion of that money in, and we'll continue discussions with that department. Moving on to page 9 of 25, Public Defender Standards Council. I don't think I can bat this around any more than the paper has in the news media the last 2 months, and therefore I won't. But suffice it to say, we have issues within the system that are long-term that the state of Georgia is going to have to deal with, in the best interest of the citizens of the state of Georgia. And those may be statute changes, those may be operational changes within the office, or a combination of both. But again, out of an abundance of caution, and in order to continue to provide a constitutionally adequate defense as is currently defined by some not in this legislature, my recommendation is to fund Public Defender Standards Council at the recommendation of the governor. We have a short and a long-term problem here. The short-term problem is a lack of cash in that office. While we might not agree with all of the manners in which it's being run and the way it's being directed, we don't think the budgetary process is a place to engage in that conversation. So I would recommend that we would move forward with the governor's recommendation for funding while we work a parallel path to improve the system. Moving on to page 10 of 25, Superior Courts. We have some changes here, the first of which is the pay raise from 4 to 3. I will just refer to that as the pay raise from now on. I think we all understand what we're doing there. We're providing the same as other state employees. That's on line 10.2.1 and 10.3.1 and 10.4.1. The next change is on 10.4.5. It's also important to understand the recommendation here. This was put in to provide step pay raise increases to secretaries effective April 1st, 2007. This actually does several things. It adds a step. It adds years of service component in to the pay of the secretaries as Superior Court judges. I believe the House recommended this last year. It did not survive the Senate and/or conference, so it has been brought back as a mid-year adjustment. I am not recommending that we fund that at mid-year. I want to make it real clear that is something that the House did wish to fund last year, and we think that's a valid policy discussion and one which we look forward to having in 08 along with the Senate. But again, out of an abundance of caution, we don't want to get into a policy discussion on the 07 budget with our colleagues across the hall and or the governor's office on that. So we're going to leave that funding and look for that in the 08 budget. That's, again, no reflection on the merits of the plan that's been put forth. We just don't feel like a non-approved pay schedule mid-year is the time to do that, especially given the other funding requirements around the state. 10.4.6, this is to restore a budget reduction from FY05. We are not recommending that be funded at this time for reasons previously stated. We think that those discussions are best had during a full-year budget process. 10.4.7, provide funds for the 2 judgeships. This is basically the judge equivalent of what I spoke of earlier in the district attorney's budget. We do realize the need for those and suspect that statutory change will be come through the House and the Senate. So we say yes to the Cobb and Dublin circuits and stand ready to work with the House and Senate and fund those as we go forward in 08. But realistically, there's no place for that money to be utilized in this fiscal year with the other budgetary needs. Recommendation is for that to go to 0. Same thing would go forward with that item as has gone forward with the district attorneys. Should they need startup money for those offices, we will look at doing that through the conference process. 12 of 25, the Supreme Court. The only change we have there is the pay raise change from 4 to 3%. 13 of 25. This is where you will see most of the action from a monetary standpoint in my recommendation, although from a percentage standpoint it is probably the least. All of the mid-year requests for the Department of Corrections, I recommend that we agree to. Those are things that need to be done. However, looking at the reserve funds in 2 specific accounts within corrections and talking with our budget staff and in leadership, there's a couple of reserve funds out there that are funding things that, while they may be needed, they need to be part of the budget discussion. In order to bring those into play, my recommendation is that we agree to the programs that were addressed by the Department of Corrections at mid-year. Basically, we say yes to those programs. The pre-release center at Pelham needs to be open. The things need to be done. But we have taken the new funding out of the budget. We expect those funds to be done, those programs to be funded with monies that Corrections has and with the reserve funds. And I'm sure this will spark an energetic and ongoing conversation, and we look forward to having that. But it's really very important for House leadership and members of this committee to understand where the monies are being spent, and we don't question the need in some of the areas for some of these funds in the telecommunications fund, but we think those need to come through the budget process, and we think this is a good opportunity for us to do that. So again, just so that everybody understands, we do realize the need and want the startup and operating cost at the Pelham Pre-Release Center. Those beds, we do want those covered, and there's money in the departments within those reserve funds to take care of that in 07. if the department feels otherwise, we have an opportunity to talk about that as we go through conference. The Department of Defense, page 16, we recommend no changes. Department of Driver Services, page 17, we recommend no changes. The GBI, page 18 and 19, we have no changes at this time. Juvenile Justice, on page 20 and 21, have no changes. The Department of Law has no changes on page 22. Pardons and paroles have no changes. I promise you it just worked out like this. It wasn't that we just got tired and quit looking at the budget after page 20, but we recommend no changes. The next change, the committee I would draw your attention to is Public Safety 37.5.1. This is the only add that we have that I recommend to the committee at this time, and we recommend the addition of $175,227 to fund the 3% salary adjustment that I believe the House thought we funded last year. I'm not sure that everybody didn't believe that this had been funded, but two pay classifications were left out of that, lieutenants and sergeants first class. I think when sergeants were put into the document, the assumptions was that took care of sergeants and sergeants first class. It appeared that it did not, so this money, I'm told by our analysts, will cover basically keeping those two ranks within the pay raise that this House and I think probably this legislature thought that we gave to these folks last year. So I recommend that the committee adopt that. That would be our only add. It's important to realize, Mr. Chairman, that pay plan would be retroactive to January 1st, 2007 for the folks, because that's when the other pay grades receive their increase. That's on page 24 of 25. That concludes the changes that I recommend to the committee for adoption or for recommendation to the full committee on our portion of the 2007 mid-year budget. Are there any questions of the committee? Okay, I have a question.
Oh, well,
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to be recognized for a motion.
If there are no questions, now would be the appropriate time. I see no lights.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I move do pass on the amended mid-year budget for our subcommittee.
I have a motion and second that this do pass on mid-year budget. I didn't see a gentleman to my left that had a question. If there's no objection, I'll take that question in discussion of this motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
What number are you? Number 11?
Number 11. Good job on this. I've only got one question, perhaps, and this is just for the wisdom of the chairman. On the correctional budget,
Yes, sir.
the $15 million that it's our intention is to authorize these expansions, but that they would use those monies. Would it not be appropriate that we put a line in here to specify which funds that they should use?
Gentlemen, referring to the using of the reserve funds.
Right.
Let me deal that. I think that would be fine. I don't think we have to direct them to use those, but if we can do that.
The reason I'm saying that, knowing the thinking process over at DOC, that money, while it may be the leadership's intention that they would be using that 15, if they could find it somewhere else, they may.
Yes, sir.
And they're notorious for shifting monies around. So in these areas, if we specified a certain language, specific language, while these are authorized, that they would be authorized to come out of that certain pot of money.
Okay. Can we look at adding that language, Mike? We will do that.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Chairman.
a good recommendation. Is there further discussion? Motion is to send this budget along to the full committee with a due pass recommendation. Is there further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries. This will be moved along to full committee with that due pass recommendation. I thank once again the budget analysts and Janae Burt for helping us here, Stephanie Kozel in our office for helping us with the budget. I thank all the committee members for their hard work on doing this work so far. We have only just begun the 08 budget. We all know what we have ahead of us and the constraints that we have financially. So I appreciate everybody working with us. Just for the committee's knowledge, I believe we will be targeting next Tuesday and Wednesday for further committee meetings on the 08 budget. If the committee could make travel plans to do that, we would try to meet, I would think, after lunch on Tuesday and perhaps Wednesday morning so that we could get in 2 good days of meetings and still, for those that travel from outstate, give you opportunity to get home. If there's no further business before the committee, we'll stand adjourned without objection. Without objection, we are adjourned.